to you.
Flip a coin, but
we're getting to be like, who are those chipmunks? No, after you. No, I insist, after you. Yes.
So,
go ahead.
My first book, The Damage Done, introduced Lily Moore, who, as I mentioned, is a travel writer. In that book, she's called home to New York when she's told that her sister's died, only to come home and find it's not her sister who's died. It's a woman who's stolen her sister's identity, and her sister is missing. And because her sister's been in trouble with the police, Lily doesn't know whether her sister is actually the victim of a crime or if she's somehow involved in committing a crime. So that book ends, not to be too spoilery, but that book ends in a pretty dark place. When you talk about darkness and whatnot, that book certainly does deliver on that front. This book, the next one to fall, picks up 3 months later, and Lily actually gets to go on the road. In this case, she goes to Peru, and she is lured there basically by her best friend Jessie. At the end of The Damage Done, she's basically found out a lot of people that she's put trust in have betrayed her. And Jessie, her best friend, who's a travel photographer, is the one person that she still trusts. So he convinces her, he's a travel photographer, she's a travel writer, that they can travel to Peru together, they can make money while doing this, and that this will really kind of lift her out of the sort of the dark place that she's been in. And wouldn't you know it, they arrive at Machu Picchu, and first thing, they hear a couple arguing, and next thing you know, there's a woman lying at the bottom of a stone staircase at Machu Picchu. So I will read a short section of the book that picks up from there, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about what inspired it. Jessie ran down the steps, and I followed him, almost tripping on a silver cylinder. There was nothing to grab to steady myself but the wall. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, I looked down and saw that Jessie had almost reached the woman. There was a noise behind me, and I turned my head, catching sight of a man at the top of the staircase. His head was covered by a woolly Andean cap with ear flaps and pom-poms. He was pale, and his chin had an unruly overgrowth of black beard. The split second he was there, our eyes met, and then he ran. "Lily!" Jessie called. I continued down the steps, holding the wall for support. As I got closer, the woman came into focus. Her long red hair cascaded over the cold, wet stone. She was wearing a black satin raincoat and black trousers, but only one foot had a shoe, a black patent wedge heel. The other must have gone over the side of the mountain. Her eyes opened suddenly, shocking me and making me hug the wall even closer. For a moment, I thought she was dead, but Jessie was saying, "You're going to be okay," to her, over and over. Her lips were painted bright red, and they were moving, muttering words I couldn't make out. She was alive, but her skin had a grayish pallor, as if the color of the surrounding stones was seeping into her, and she pressed one hand against her chest. "I gotta get help," Jessie said. "You stay with her, Lil." "Please," the woman moaned. "Don't leave me." My heart trembled. I didn't want to stay with a woman who looked as if she were about to die. "I'll get help," I said. "You'll get lost, Lil. You stay here. Keep her conscious." Jessie ran up the steps, his long legs taking them 2 at a time. At the top, he vanished around the corner without a backward glance. "Is this what a heart attack feels like?" the woman whispered. "Am I going to die?" "Just hold on. Jessie's getting help. You're going to be fine." He made me drink something. At first, I didn't think it was doing anything, but then... She closed her eyes and her head drooped to the side. "No, stay awake!" Her eyes opened wide as if I'd startled her. She stared as if seeing me for the first time. "Who are you?" "Lily." I knelt beside her. "What's your name?" "Trista. Are you really here?" I looked her over. She was about my height, with long, wavy hair dyed a dark burgundy red. Her body was skinny, even bony, suggesting that her prominent breasts, jutting like twin peaks through a thin t-shirt, might be as fake as her hair color. She could have been my age, 30, or a little older. "What are you on?" I asked her. "Some kind of drug?" "Go away." Her eyelids fluttered and shut. I grabbed her hand and her shoulder, gently shaking both. "You need to stay awake, Trista." Her hand was sticky, and when I looked at it, I saw my own was now red with blood. "What happened to you?" I tried not to panic. How badly hurt was she? I turned her hand and saw a gash in her palm. There was blood on her wrist, too. I tugged up the sleeve of her black raincoat to see the damage. The red was just a smear that must have come from her hand, but I noticed something else that made me catch my breath. Track marks. The telltale trail of the junkie ran from her wrist into the crook of her elbow. They didn't look new, but they weren't that old either. I knew from long experience with my sister exactly what scars they left behind, and that some of them never healed. What are you on right now? Nothing. That was obviously a lie. I pulled back a little, but she grabbed my wrist, as if suddenly alarmed I might really leave. Where's Len? Her nails dug into my wrist. Who's Len? She didn't respond. Was he the man you were fighting with? With no one else around, I assumed that this woman was one half of the pair that had been fighting minutes earlier. Her grip on me tightened. You heard us fight? Her eyes were open now, intense and lucid and fixed on mine. She was breathing hard. What did you hear? I'd thought she was out of it, tripping on some drug, but suddenly she seemed wild and predatory, and I wished I'd kept my mouth shut. He said you lied to him, and you said you wished you'd never come back, I admitted. What else? That's it. My friend and I were talking. My voice petered out as I watched her face. Her tongue was flicking at the corners of her mouth, and her eyes were on the sky. Bastard. This is all his fault. He hates me. Her eyes were pale blue, and they seemed watery, as if she were about to cry. But she didn't. She blinked and took a few deep breaths, as if girding herself up for something terrible. She grimaced, and her eyes took on the hardness of flat stones. For a split second, I was less afraid for her than I was of her. Doesn't matter. I hate him too. She gritted her teeth as she spoke. She was coherent and responsive. I had to keep her talking, but I didn't want to upset her any further. There was a man at the top of the stairs. He had a Peruvian hat, the kind with the pom-poms, and a black beard. Is that Len? Yes. Her breathing was ragged, and she let go of my wrist and pressed her hand to her chest again. This is his way of getting rid of me. Rid of you? I always knew I'd die young, but I didn't think it would end like this. She closed her eyes, but she wasn't drifting into unconsciousness. Her face contorted. She was obviously in pain. You're going to be okay, Trista. My friend went to get help. He'll be back any minute. I can't believe I was ever in love with that bastard. I threw away the best years of my life on him. But don't worry, I'm getting even. Her eyes opened and stared into mine with an urgency that both drew me in and made me want to back away. Listen to me. Len made me drink something that made me sick. Then he pushed me down the stairs. Tell the police. Promise me. If you can't, I will. I promise. Don't let him get away with what he's done. If he didn't have Daddy's money, Len would be in jail right now, but the money makes him untouchable. I touched her cheek, and the heat of her skin scorched my fingertips. Whether it was from a drug or fever, she seemed to be burning up, and I could feel the pounding of her rapid heartbeat drumming through her. He's already crazy, so it wasn't hard to make him crazier. Her eyes bulged and her mouth was open as she gasped. Whatever thin oxygen there was at this altitude wasn't enough for her lungs. She desperately needed help. Maybe you should just rest right now. Her head moved from side to side. Do you hear the snakes? Snakes? The hissing. Her glassy eyes floated to my face again. She was raving now, mentally moving away from me and the mountain and, I hoped, the pain she was in. As long as she kept talking, there was hope. The risk with a concussion, which she had to have, was passing out and never waking up. I don't hear them, I said. Len said there'd be snakes, she said, panting. He abandoned me before, after everything I did for him. Then he crawled back, just like Tina said he would. She was getting agitated again. I can hear people coming, Trista. There were footsteps and the rumble of a voice, though still too far away to be distinct. You're going to be fine. No, I'm not. Her face twisted. I'm going to die here. You'll be fine, Trista, I promise. I was desperate to believe it myself. You can't promise me that, she whispered. Her lips moved again, but no sound came out. I put my face close to hers, trying to hear her, but there was only the hiss of her gasps for breath.